Thank you very much for your invitation to come tonight. My wife kindly drove me up tonight, and I joked and said, I'll never go to Pontypridd again, because when we pulled off the road, it said Pontypridd 8 miles. And then we drove on a little bit, and it said Pontypridd 7 miles. And then it said Pontypridd 8 miles. So we've obviously been trying travelling tonight, as well as driving along trying to get to Pontypridd. Obviously, people here in these counties enjoy funny miles. A couple of quick things. I should make it clear, good luck to all of you, but it should be clear, obviously, I'm here tonight as a member of Yes Cymru. What I say tonight is not necessarily the policy of Plaid Cymru. And I've also said, please feel free to take photos. I will sign them later with a big kiss. And indeed to make notes. But please don't record in, because there's a solicitor here present, and I've got to be careful that I don't do too much libel before the night is out. So let's begin. The first message is this: do not be distracted. I am genuinely more optimist now than I have ever been. There is something going on. I don't know what it is, but it's there. It's in the ether. There's something going on. And it bothers me a bit that there may well be distraction. So my first message tonight is don't be distracted. We can sort out all the other issues afterwards. On that one famous day, whenever they come, and it can't come soon enough, that's all we can sort out. Those differences about policies and language and all kinds of things. But do not be distracted. And the other thing I want to say before we begin is this. In Scotland, you will recall, they had what was famously called Project Fear. Here we're going to have Project Fiction. Because of course what's going to happen over the next year or two, I'll not wait till 2030 for the referendum by the way. What's going to happen here in Wales is we're going to have Project Fiction. The lies are going to pile up over the next few months and the next few years. And I hope, not least tonight, there's some of the things I have to say to you, hopefully will help to bury those lies. But it's going to be Project Fiction, not Project Fear. The fear is the new Scotland, and of course, and all the free whiskey. Here is going to be Project Fiction. I want to spend a little bit of time tonight trying to bury some of these fictions in the face. The first, of course, is that Wales is too small. Well, actually, that's absolutely true. But let me go through the figures for a moment. There are 193 independent sovereign states represented in the UN at New York. And I've been privileged on a number of occasions to be there, and indeed I've met the Irish ambassador. I will not go to the UK ambassador. And I've been privileged to be in the General Assembly of the UN, not within a session, I think that was by coincidence. If you take the population of Wales as being small, at about 3 million, there are 60 nations represented in the UN, representing 31% of the full membership. And of those 60, 38 have a population of less than 1 million, that's about 20%. And of these, 11 have a population of, you ready for this, 100,000. And of these, 6 full independent states represented at the United Nations in New York have a population of less than 10,000. Now, economists take the view that about 5 million is about the correct size in terms of population for a wealthy, well-run economic system, if you like, of about 5 million. And 5 million is largely regarded as small in terms of statistics. So if we take 5 million as small, then the numbers really become interesting. Those populations represented at the UN with populations, those nations represent the UN with populations of 5 million or more are 86, which is 46% of the entire membership of the United Nations, by definition, are small nations. So therefore, it clearly follows that there's something going on here if 46% of the members of the UN are small nations. Now the problem we've got is this. The UN and the Commonwealth of Nations and other organisations have said, look, we need some kind of definitive definition of what constitutes a small nation. And the number now regarded as a small nation is a population of about 1.5 million. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, our enemies are absolutely right. Because if 1.5 million is a small nation and our population is 3 million, then we are too big to be independent. Before we move on to some of the economic arguments, I want to just touch on one or two, what I think, interesting things about the stories being told. And I'm going to pick on two countries for a minute, Iceland and Croatia. Now I pick on Iceland and Croatia for two particular reasons, not really related to something I said last night. You will recall that Iceland put England out of the World Cup 4 years ago, and Croatia put them out, was it 3 years ago? Now the ridiculous thing, of course, is that Iceland is a population of 300,000. That's about the size of Cardiff. And Iceland has its own currency, its own airline, its own seat in the United Nations, its own stock exchange, its own language, and its own way of life. But it can't possibly be with a population of 300,000. That's nonsense, of course it is. And by the way, one of the things I love about the BBC, the British Biased Corporation, I'm serious. I make the mistake of watching television occasionally. It's always a mistake of watching television. Was it yesterday? The BBC. I'm a very sad person. I timed. Was it the English football? The English. No, it was this guy, this football manager. I don't know his name. Some top school or some place in England. And BBC ran about 4 minutes on this story, on the news story. I just don't care. ITV in this lane ran about 30 seconds on it. So it's always all through English and wonderful England in a way. What I really find I like about the BBC is the way they describe Westminster as the mother of parliaments. Now we know that, don't we? Westminster is the mother of parliament. We're all told that, you're told that in school. Well, I got news for the schoolmasters and those amongst us. The first mother of parliaments, that is to say the fully representative elected body in Europe, was in Iceland in the year 980. And if you take full franchise as being a parliament, then there was not full franchise in the UK, whatever that is, until 1928, when women finally achieved the vote. Now then, that makes Westminster not the mother of parliaments, I need my fingers right, but the great granddaughter of parliaments. Iceland, economics later. We measure economic growth in a thing called gross domestic product, GDP. You'll see this all over the place. Essentially, GDP, in a nutshell, is what a nation produces. It's a measure, it's a crude measure. Just a bit of stubborn nation company yesterday, but I asked it to measure it. It is a crude measure, but it's a measure used all over the world. And we measure a nation's wealth by dividing its total GDP by its population to measure how rich that country is economically. And it's called, therefore, GDP per head. The GDP per head of Iceland is £63,000 per person. Sorry, £60,000 per person. The GDP per capita of London is £61,000 per person. Now, can somebody please explain to me why a country of 600 people has a greater GDP per capita than London, which has 8 million people? I know what the answer is. Because Iceland is a small, self-governing state with its own priorities, its own way of life. Oh, by the way, just to compare this, the GDP per capita of Wales the last time I looked was 17,000. That's about 4 times less than Iceland, just for the record. I found a fascinating article in The Economist a few weeks ago. It's a bit of a right-wing rag, but it's some good stuff in it. And they point to what I thought was a fascinating statistic. Of the 19 European nations that have the euro, 5 The average growth in the euro area over the last 2 years is about 1.5%. About 1.5% per annum. There are 5 nations in the EU system that have grown by 5%. That's 3 times the average growth within the European system. And you'll never ever guess who these 5 are. Well, we'll have a competition. Oh, I'll tell you who they are. You will be surprised to find it's Slovakia, Slovenia, Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania. 5 times the annual growth of the entire European initiative. But what brings those 5 together? They are small. They did not exist. Like taking Croatia did this. There are many in this room older than this. Croatia was not an independent sovereign state until 1992, well within the lifetime of many of you in this room. It also applies to Slovakia, Slovenia, Lithuania, Estonia and Latvia. They did not exist as independent sovereign states before 1992. And the other thing that sets them apart is that they were overpowered by a strong, overpowering neighbour. I know what I'd rather be. Yeah. If I was on mainland Europe, I'd like to be in Slovakia, Slovenia, Lithuania, etc., etc. The other thing, by the way, and I love this stuff about Europe, about the different. It wasn't so long ago we had no models. It wasn't so long ago we had nothing we could look at. Now we can look at these small there's a phrase here, I've forgotten to use it. Eisenhower, who was president from 60 to whatever it was, I forget, 52 to 60. And he called the nations of Eastern Europe captive nations. It's a lovely phrase. Captive nations. And there are still captive nations, and we are one of them. Yeah. And these 5 fast-growing states were captive nations. And some of you who heard me, there's few of you in this room, heard me before, so I'm waiting for them to go to sleep, and I keep an eye on them. My wife and I are quite sad people, really. We watched Eurovision. Oh, sad can that out? You know, it's pretty sad, isn't it? But you know, you've heard me say this, of course, you're in Europe watching Eurovision. You know, you have bottles of wine and frog's legs and the best cheese. You know, we don't. We have faggots and peas and a couple of cans of brains. That's but you know what? Okay, Eurovision may not be the most exciting political event in the world, but you know there were 28 who took part in that contest with Europe looking on, and of those 28, 5 were previous captive nations, singing in their own language, very often singing songs that had been written in their own language, in their own country, singing in front of the world with enormous pride. And guess who wasn't there? Let's get on to economics. People have described economics as a dismal science, for those who studied economics. But let's hope it's not too dismal tonight. So there are a couple of things I think to be said. The first thing is this. Our enemies in Wales have made a great deal of this alleged gap between revenue in Wales and spending in Wales. And I'm going to put that to bed once and for all today. We'll come back to that in a minute. But the first thing to say is, and in all fairness, the work done by Cardiff University is accurate and is sensible. But in keeping with correct academic approach, they took what's called the who benefits approach. What does one particular country or region benefit from being a part of a greater union? So the numbers are a bit silly, but in fairness to Cardiff, that's the academic approach they have taken. And that's why these figures, as far as we are concerned, are incorrect. But the first thing to say is that we don't know. The honest to God answer is we don't know. The major sources of finance for government is obviously income tax, that's pretty obvious. Value-added tax, corporation tax and national insurance. Now of those, income tax is fairly straightforward. There are problems, by the way, in collecting income tax, but that's another story. The income tax one is probably about right, maybe. We have no idea, the truth is, how much VAT is actually collected in Wales? We've no idea. And in fairness to Cardiff, they'll stab at this, but they use 4 different methods to have a stab at how much VAT was collected in Wales, because we just don't know. The next time you pop into Boots for a, I don't know, pack of cigarettes, somebody buying Boots these days, the next time you go to B&Q or Tesco or all these places, the VAT that you pay will be registered against the VAT paid by that business wherever it is. Tesco's headquarters, for example, is in Cheshunt in Hertfordshire. So the next time you go into Tesco and buy something, their VAT is allocated against Cheshunt, not against Pontypridd. The same applies to the enormous amount of external ownership of business in Wales. When Tesco declare their corporation tax, which is like an income tax of businesses, then that is by definition declared against their headquarters at Cheshunt. So the truth is, we don't know, is the bottom line. We can make reasonable stabs at it, but the truth is, we don't know. What is really interesting about these figures as well is that compared to the UK, all these 4 are less. We collect less income tax than the average for the UK, less corporation tax than the average for the UK, less VAT than the average for the UK, but about the same as national insurance. And ladies and gentlemen, there's a reason for this. The reason, it might sound, hang on a minute, this is counterintuitive. How can there be less income tax than average, but about the same national insurance? The reality is this. There is less income tax because poor skill levels and poor pay levels. It's as simple as that. And the main reason national insurance is so high is because even those on 0 hours and limited hours still have to pay national insurance. The national insurance threshold is a lot less than the income tax threshold. So what those figures also show us is how poor those who have been running this economy, what a poor job they have done over the years. And by the way, I remember, the enemies of Wales use these figures and say, oh, it's 29% of GDP. It's 17%, or 17%, of GDP. It's not. It's nothing to do with GDP. It is equivalent to. And when our enemies of Wales are saying it is X% of, it's nonsense. That is simply not possible. It is equivalent to. And that's an important definition, because it can't be part of GDP. Now that's it. First part, we don't honestly know how accurate these figures are. They're a stab in the dark. A reasonable stab in the dark, but a stab in the dark nevertheless. Now the expenditure makes some very interesting reading. Because expenditure was based on the who benefits approach, there are some quite interesting figures in this. For example, out of these figures, a figure of 1.8 billion was for defence. That's about 6% equivalent to GDP. That's more than America pays. 1.8 billion pounds sterling in defence allocated to our revenue. Now, if you add that up over 3 or 4 years, we could probably afford a couple of aircraft carriers. I think, John, a couple of aircraft carriers, what do you think? Really, 2 aircraft carriers? We can't, well, we'd be in the Royal Navy, we'll buy a couple of aircraft carriers, we can't afford the planes. That's the British government, in its wisdom, has built these 2 really fancy aircraft carriers, but they can't afford to buy the planes. Like, it's magic. We can. We can probably afford both. So before we start, we can knock 2 billion off this gap before we start. The gap is about 14, 15 billion. We can knock 2 billion off that before we start. In the social payment section, there's, let me get this figure right, I'm not being horrible to people, there's an allocation of £2 billion sterling in pensions for those who have moved into Wales. Now, because of the benefits approach. Now, I would have thought that people who move into another country, that their pension is paid by their home country. We have relatives in Spain, and their pension is paid by the British government, or by the Spanish government. And I said, in other meetings, £2 billion is pretty generous. We're a generous people, but I don't think we are that generous. You bring your own pension, thank you. So now we're up to 4 billion. We are in somewhere now. There's an accounting adjustment. There's always an accounting adjustment. These numbers don't turn out. I'm surprised how much the accounting adjustment is actually. The accounting adjustment is £3 billion. So for those who can count, we're now up to £7 billion out of a gap of about 13, 14. So you know, hang on now, these numbers are beginning not to sound just so horrific as our enemies would like to tell us. what I really like, I love this. There's some money for infrastructure in the expenditure, and there's a contribution to HS2. Now hang on a minute. No, this is serious. I think my geography master sat along with us. I think he was lying. HS2 is supposed to hit London with, the line's gone, Manchester, Leeds, or the other way around, I forget. Though as far as I know, Manchester isn't in Wales. I don't know, maybe I can't do the math. Maybe my overall geography has let me down. So we are contributing to HS2. And by the way, what I remember, before I forget to say this, HS2 apparently is costing some in the region of £250 million a mile. A mile. I've seen a paper that suggests reopening from scratch. Reopening the railway line from Carmarthen to Lambeth to Aberystwyth would be about £800 million. That's 3 miles of HS2. So next time we're on HS2, if ever finished, just look at the window and say, oh, we paid that bit. Because we probably did. There's also in this budget £5 billion for non-identifiable expenditure. And this is magic stuff. I love this stuff. This is magic stuff. Non-identifiable expenditure. What does that mean? Well, it means it's a bit sort of get thrown in the pot. Things like for example, overseas aid, with which I have no problem for my own correct. But £250 million of this is our contribution to the BBC. Now, £250 million in greater scheme of things isn't actually a lot of money. But when you consider all we're getting out of BBC Wales is Bob and a Comb, which is brilliant. What is it, a silly programme for antiques is on 12:30. Something else, that's about it. What we have got for that £250 million, my wife and I were in Manchester last week. We of course to go to Media City, which is quite a distance out actually. And there was this lovely big, smashing big BBC building with all the toys and the flashing lights and a big screen. And I said, we keep that. So next time you're in Media City in Manchester and somebody says, you come from a poor country, say, we built that Bitcoin, you didn't, it comes out of our money. So there's £250 million. £250 million would do a lot to rebuild our broadcasting system. An awful lot. Not plowed into fancy offices in Manchester. Having said that, the gap is clearly nothing like our enemies are telling us. But we have to say this in fairness, there is a gap. There will always be a gap between revenue and taxation. And some of you have heard me say this, and I still find it funny, I hope you do. Back in the day, if you were a supporter of Plaid Cymru or Cymraeg Iaith or the Welsh Language Schools or any of these things back in the day, the first thing somebody would say to you was, do you siarad Cymraeg? And of course a lot of my generation didn't, they don't. And of course the thing would be, oh, well I'm learning, or, you know, and the argument would fall. But Ted Ollie might be offended if we look at this. Somebody will say to him, do you siarad Cymraeg? I do, Pam! Yes, why? Oh, sorry. And so I do this, but I love this. People say to me, oh, can I hear somebody minutes ago? No. What? What? No. And you get this, well, hang on a minute, sorry. Because a minute you say, oh yes, we can, we did this one, we did this. The answer is no, of course we can't. And we'll come to that in a minute. No nation on earth pays its way. And anybody who tells us the opposite is nothing of nothing in such a phrase. Yes, the gap is much, much, much narrower than our enemies are telling us it is. No question about that. It is no worse a gap than England has got, or America has got, or Norway, or sorry, Norway's the wrong one. Norway, funny enough, does not have a budget. There was a difference, by the way, it's got a budget deficit. Norway does not have a budget deficit. And there are a handful of countries in the world which do not have a budget deficit, which by the way goes up and down. We've been told, I'll come back to this in a minute, that our budget deficit is about 24%. It's not. It's actually, once you look at these figures, it's actually somewhere about 8%. Now 8% is a lot. Let's make no bones about this. 8% is a lot. 8% equivalent GDP. In 2010, the UK budget deficit was 11%. And although there were exceptional circumstances after the Second World War, the budget deficit after the Second World War was 240% of GDP. So these things go up and down. Suggesting that this budget deficit of about 8% is going to go forever is simply not the case. We would borrow to fill the gap. Every country does. And I'll come back to that in a minute when I say about would you, could Wales live on its own, and I say no, I don't argue and see what happens. But before we do go on and look at a way to fill in the gap, let's find the other way of filling the gap. And the other way of filling the gap, of course, is increased taxation. Nobody wants to pay tax. Nobody likes paying tax. Well, you know, maybe we don't actually have to. One of the wonderful things that Margaret Thatcher did in privatising the utilities is that they now have to publish accounts. Some of you will remember the late Professor Phil Williams, who produced various economic papers. And Phil would spend hours, days, weeks digging through information, digging through stuff, because none of this stuff was published. You had to go kicking it out all over the place. It's published now. Severn Trent, have a look at that for a minute. Severn Trent accounts, no mind, put phones on the line. Severn Trent's annual account for last year, they turned over, not to say how much money they took is in the till, if you like, was £1.5 billion. Of that, the profit was £1 billion. £1 billion profit. Back in the day, people laughed at me when I said, look, we could say, who buys water? Well, I tell you who doesn't buy water, Severn Trent.
Yeah.
There's a kick-off. We'll charge him £1 billion. What? Should we charge him £1 billion? Charge him $2 billion. I joked to him, they said, no, we'll turn the taps off, that'll be fine. But it's an indication of what this is worth. It's worth £1 billion. There are only 5 countries in the whole world that produce more electricity than they can consume. And of those 5, you'll never guess which is 5th. You're sitting in it. And I've got to do the numbers. I put onto this, I've said there are currencies numbers. But that's worth about £1.5 billion. So now we've got £2.5 billion in tax, and we haven't touched you for a penny yet. We are the only country in the whole world, it strikes me, that has, allegedly, a tourist industry. And we're the only country in the world that doesn't have a tourist tax. I've been privileged in my life to travel the world. And everywhere we go, we stick our my credit card down and they say, oh, I'm sorry, it's been delayed. Or whatever the words go, it doesn't have to be funny. Always. And you get to the bill. You know, room, beer, all this sort of stuff. And this, you know, I know. In Canada, there's a sales tax, a tourist tax, and a room, is it the room tax? There were 3. My wife, by the way, she's going into thank you. She also remembers that my mind goes. But we pay these things. At the end of the day, you're up in Spain, you're drinking lager, you're eating Spanish food, and sitting in the sunshine, and you're not serious, you're going to say, I'm not paying another euro on top of this bill for 100. And those who oppose tourist tax are lying. 46 members of the UN have a tourist tax of different sorts. Some of those, incidentally, who have liners calling them, what are called cruise liners, there's actually a tax on each person who gets off the cruise liner. And you know, people aren't going to say, well, I'm staying on the liner because I've got to pay 50 cents. Tourism tax in Ireland is worth £2 billion a year. £2 billion a year. Somebody doing the maths here? Because now we're up to £4.5 billion, and we still haven't got any money in your pocket. And for the record, there are other things, which I'll touch on very quickly. There's a lot of debate, incidentally. Rhys Gwilym was one of us, of course, at Bangor, has been writing at length on this so-called value land tax. It's a bit abstract for a minute, but it's been used in America. It's quite interesting. Taxing land isn't in use. So that, for example, someone who's sitting on a land waiting for planning a will have to pay out the value of that land. It's a lovely tax. You can't avoid it. You can't, like profit, you can't hide it. It's there, it's sitting in it. And if the buildings are left derelict, just where we live in Portfetch again, in Pont Dulles, if you drive into Pont Dulles, there's a lovely old hotel, the Gwyn Hotel. It's been empty for some years, it's boarded up, and the roof is falling in. And what a lovely introduction to the pretty village of Pontedulles. Under a value land tax, you'd have to pay something. Or get it fixed. It would be cheaper to get it fixed. The figures suggest, and I suspect it's a bit on the generous side, the figures that Rees has produced suggest that a value land tax in Wales would be worth somewhere in the region of £6 billion. So we're almost there. A chunk of that, by the way, would replace business rates and local authority rates, just for the record. But what is really interesting about the value land tax, but it's not always all money, is that this was tried in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania. And I said you must go to Philadelphia, in the state formerly known as New Wales, as you may or may not know. 66% of the buildings were put back into use. Derelict buildings falling down empty land, 2/3 were put back into use because the owners had to pay tax if they didn't. France has introduced a digital services tax of 2%. Now I have no idea how you make that work, I honestly don't. But it's interesting that these ideas of new taxes are being developed without necessarily, ladies and gentlemen, asking you to put your hand in your pocket or pay another £1 or £2 for a pint of beer. Let's go back to what I said earlier on about borrowing. There will always be a gap of sorts. But let's be realistic about this. The very nature of an economy is its dynamism, its very nature. I just said to you that budget deficit that's after the war was 240% of what it was, equivalent to GDP. In the UK now it's about 6 or 7. These things, the fiscal adjustment going on, these things got to know. And the truth is, we probably, and certainly in the early days, I'm a great believer in this. Let's bite the bullet and let's tell them. We will have to go to the market and borrow money. If we are going to restore the roads and railways and the schools and our education system and health service, in the short term we have to borrow money. Let's be blunt about this. And we won't be the only ones because that's the way the world works. But what is really interesting, somebody says, but the current budget deficit, the end of financial year in the UK, mostly spent on things you really need like nuclear weapons, was £25 billion. That's the immediate deficit. If Boris's spending actually takes place, then that will incur a further £61 billion of borrowing. Now any borrowing that isn't paid back goes into what's called the national debt. That's the overall debt of a particular country. Not to be confused with the budget deficit, which is current and recent. The national debt is a debt that builds up over years because it's not paid back. The only Chancellor, by the way, who paid back any debt as a matter of interest was Roy Jenkins. The only Chancellor ever in the UK, incidentally, and Welsh was the only Chancellor ever to pay back any debt. As we sit here this evening, if you want to tell me any lies, as we sit here this evening, the national debt of the United Kingdom, that's to say how much money it owes the rest of the world, is approximately £2 trillion sterling. For those of you with a mathematical mind, that's 12 knots. The national debt of the United States of America, as we sit here, is 20 trillion US dollars. And they've got the bloody nerve to tell us that we are through it. Oh, by the way, one of the interesting things, Sheffield University have done with a fascinating paper, where they've taken the methodology used by Cardiff and applied it. The government breaks up the UK into 12 so-called economic regions. I don't like being a region, but one of them is Wales, one is Scotland, then the North East, North West, etc., etc., etc. All these 12 economic regions, 3 have a positive budget deficit. Surprise, surprise, London, the South East and the East. Every other region, including Wales and Scotland, of the UK are running a budget deficit. So the next time you're told Wales is too poor, point them to the North East of England or the North West of England or the Midlands or the South West or the South East or whatever you like. Because the truth is, somebody once said to me the other day, well, if these figures add up, I promise you they do, maybe England is too poor to be independent. I want to spend a little bit of time on economic policy. I might skip that because time's gone on a bit, if you're very patient. There are 2 thoughts occurred to me, and I said this at Mirth, I haven't said this since because it crossed my mind. Boris, bless him, you couldn't take it seriously, could you? No, you can't. I mean, there's trumpet items, and Boris at number 10, and he couldn't make it up. I mean, if somebody got to the BBC and said, listen, I've got this script for a play, they'd be shut the door. Absolutely. Boris has said that I'm not paying to leave the European Union. I ain't finding £39 billion to leave the European Union. Well, I got news for Boris. If he ain't paying to leave his union, we're not leaving to leave our union. I hear the story, which I think, you know, this is actually doing us a favour. So many times, people have said to me, oh, what about all these businesses? What about all these businesses? Airbus, Toyota are two classics. Steve said, we're going. We're not having this nonsense, we're going. Brexit's confusing us, Boris doesn't know his answer, we're going. And surprise, surprise, we're not. And if anyone was going to leave at any time in the history of the Welsh economy, Airbus and Toyota would have gone. So when they point the finger at you and say, oh, the minutes independence, they're all pack their bags and go, no, they won't. They're still here and they're staying here, which destroys another argument of our enemies. And I was reading only today, and see, ladies and gentlemen, this stuff is hot off the press. This is hotter than hot cross buns and Good Friday. I was reading an article only this morning. Newspapers have been delighted in saying that the problems in Catalonia have led to 300 businesses leaving Catalonia. Actually, if you look at the evidence, what they've not left at all. What they've done, in some cases at least, is simply to re-register a business outside to maintain any tax levels and any immediate problems upon independence. They've not left at all. But I found a fascinating piece only today. Let me make it does anybody know what a bilateral investment treaty is? I bet you go to bed worrying about a bilateral investment treaty, don't you? A bilateral investment treaty, apparently the treaty between nations, where they agree on problems of... Do you get these moments? What's the word? Sorry, the word is gone. It'll come back to me now in the middle of the night. It's an appropriation where a country appropriates. It says, I'm having that, you can't have that, I'm having that. And what is really interesting, as a consequence of Jeremy Corbyn's ideas, a large number of companies in England, and surprise, surprise, have moved their assets and their businesses in terms of their legal standing to other countries within this bilateral investment treaty. So when people tell you, oh, Catalonia, oh, they're all leaving, oh, bugger, they're going. Well, they're doing that in England, folks. So, you know, there's a little bit of a shed full of hypocrisy here somewhere. Oh no, I can't do that. Nearly there. You all went to the bar this evening and bought drink. What's an idea? That's mine. You all went to the bar this evening and bought a drink. During the Scottish referendum, this is the libel bit, stay with me. During the Scottish referendum, Mark Carney, who's governor of the Bank of England, who was described by The Economist as, as charismatic. God, if that's charisma, can you imagine? Dull. I actually took part in a radio debate with Jason Mohammed, myself, and this idiot on the phone. Now, what he knows about economics, I know about brain surgery. But during the Scottish referendum, he said that Scotland could not be part of a currency union. That is to say, maintain the use of a pound. He was lying. There is no reason why Scotland, and us if we so wish, should remain within a currency union. Because, ladies and gentlemen, just for the record, a currency union already exists. The currency union is the Scottish and Northern Ireland pound. I'm really going to make sure I get this right. The Isle of Man, the three Channel Islands, the British Overseas Territories, St Helena and Ascension Island. are all part of an existing currency union which we would join if we wished. And ladies and gentlemen, there is sweet nothing that Carney and his chums could do about it. So that's out of the way to start with, if we so wished. Secondly, if we so wished, I reject this completely. Secondly, if we so wished, we can undertake what's known as sterlingization. That is to say that we could continue using the pound without the consent of the Bank of England. Now that sounds a bit wild, and let me just come to this a minute. Interestingly enough, Andrew Neil, now there's another one who knows about as much economics I know about brain surgery, was talking to somebody from the SNP. And he said, your policy, he said, is sterlingization. The SNP has said after independence they're going to adopt us on sterlingization and continue using the pound without the protection of the Bank of England. We'll come back to that in a second as well. Oh, he said, you'll be taking the Bank of England's interest rate. And I've got to say, this guy from the SNP, I mean, I think I got crossed. I really would have told him where to get off. So he was just very bluntly saying, no, Andrew, it's not the case. No, look, you'll have to go by the Bank of England's interest rate. No, Andrew, you won't. You'll have to time it on, and on, and on. The truth is that in sterlingization, you continue using the pound without the behest of the Bank of England. Now, that might sound a bit wild. It's quite common practice. It's not called sterlingization elsewhere, we would call it sterlingization. There are 6 countries outside the Eurozone that use the euro who are not part of the system. 11 countries use the US dollar who are not part of the system. One of which, by the way, is Zimbabwe, which is now stopped using the US dollar as a matter of interest. And 7 countries share the East Caribbean dollar. These use currencies which are not their own without using the central bank of that currency. It is a perfectly acceptable economic approach. The great strength of sterlingization, if we wanted to keep using the pound, and I honestly think there's an argument for this in the short term, then the interesting thing about sterlingization is it provides discipline. If you look at what happened with the banks, and it's another story for another day or another point, quite clearly what happened to the banks in the financial crisis was and we got to blame. Anybody here teach economics? We got to blame. It was the bankers who messed things up, not us. Because they knew, rightly or wrongly, intuitively otherwise, that the Bank of England was the bank of last resort and they would be bailed out. The great strength of sterlingization on that system is that because there's no bank, then banks have to be exceptionally disciplined. There is another big thing, by the way, called seigniorage, where we would actually pay a fee to the Bank of England to use the pound, which would then mean we would have the protection of the Bank of England. It's an academic moot point. There are those very much in favour, by the way, of our own currency. Now, I've seen lots of my friends and colleagues in the SCW have argued for a separate currency. There is something to be said for this, there's no question. There is something to be said for a separate currency, because that gives us full control over the economy. It would require a new central bank. And by the way, again, before people say, since the end of the Second War, there have been 25 new central banks set up. Think about the 5 I mentioned to you this evening earlier on. Slovakia, Slovenia, Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia did not have a central bank until 1992. Croatia, bless you, did not have a central bank until 1992. It was own currency until 1992. So there's an argument for this. I'm not sure about this. I'm not sure about this. I'll come back to that in a minute. The thing about your own currency, of course, is the name. What would you call it? Now, I said this last week. Like one or two of my friends in this company said, if we have our own currency, we should call it after Howell Dar. Howell Dar was the first to develop a Welsh currency. And they suggested that therefore we call it the Howell. Now, I got a lot of friends who were called Howell, so you'd say, well, how many Howells, how many Howells to a pint? That's my word. Actually, I got to think about this. It's like one of my wife and I silly little ideas, which I just love, a lovely idea. You may remember the lovely film Hair the Wind, which was nominated for an Oscar. How many small nations like us can claim that a film not about one of its famous poets was nominated for an Oscar of all things some years ago? And there's a lovely scene where Sue Roderick and the guy who plays the hero's name, I forget for a minute, were looking at the moon. And of course, those of you who have the language of heaven will know that we call the moon a Lleiad, you know. But of course, the original name for the moon was Arianwen. And I think that's a lovely word. I think that's such a lovely, lovely word. And if you want a lovely word, for no reason at all, for our currency, I'm in for Arianwen. It's a look, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh. That's a brief economics lecture for you. I think it'll be 5 minutes and then you can all pick up again. Thank you for listening. I said this elsewhere, it's not just about economics. It's about so many other things. So many other things. I know, I'm here because if the economy doesn't work, then we've a problem. We've got to be honest about this, so we've got to know what's going on. I said, incidentally, earlier on, that no country in the world doesn't borrow. Every country in the world borrows. That's a matter of interest. The interesting thing about having your own currency. Calvin James took part in the debate. Calvin James, bless him. Oh, by the way, this is mine, my claim to fame. You will know that Calvin James played outside half for Kevin Jonathan Davis played outside half for Kevin Barney John played outside half for Kevin and our grandson.
Hey!
Outside half for Kevin So watch out for him. I might get my free ticket yet. We would, of course, have a problem denominating international sovereign bonds when you buy money from the markets. We would generally have a problem offering £2 trillion worth of Arianwens to the market. It wouldn't work. It wouldn't work. But what is interesting, of course, is sovereign bonds, that is to say, borrowing on the open markets of the world, are invariably delineated in hard currency. They are invariably delineated in dollars. So if we did go to the market to borrow to build our railways and develop our health service and so forth, that money which we borrow would be probably in dollars. There are 3 quick things I want to say, and I'm going to shut up and sit down. The first of these, let's destroy some of these other non-academic arguments which I didn't need to destroy. First of these is the open border. This was said only the other day, I think one of the things I read. The border's too open. You're never going to be able to have an independent economy with such an open border, such a porous border. Well, I've got news for you. Our border is about 180 miles long on one side. Finland's border is 1,000 miles on each side. And if you want to see how porous borders are, put your drink down, get in your car, get on a train at Dover, drive north through Belgium, the Netherlands, turn right through Germany, come down through Austria, stop off in Prague for a pint of bloody delicious beer. And nobody will stop you. Except if you're driving in the centre road. This whole idea is nonsense. It is true that it is short-term problem. Because of course, because of the way our country has been treated over the years, most of our links are east-west, and we'll have to do something about that. But this idea somehow that it's this great big border, everybody can go back and forth, it's an absolute nonsense. I said in Carnarvon last week, I'm greatly in favour of redigging Cloud Offer and filling it with water, and a few crocodiles. What I love about this open border nonsense, I just love this. What I love about this open border nonsense, I remember, I'm not going to name names, it's not fair, well, just in case you listen. When the National Assembly decided that there would be free prescriptions here in Wales, the BBC, who else? The BBC ran a huge piece on one of these programmes about it wasn't never going to work. That they'd have students from Bristol coming over, and they'd have people from Shrewsbury coming over for their free prescriptions. It was never going to work. And of course it's true, it hasn't worked. If you go to Oxford now, if you go to the Cotswolds, you'll see what you'll see very sadly is rusting Range Rovers, abandoned houses, grass growing in the street. Why? Because they've all moved to Welshpool to save £5 on a prescription. Well, my dear friend Geraint here is a pharmacist. Now Geraint can read long words. Yeah? Now a pharmacist with a prescription from England would immediately notice that the prescription script is in 2 languages. Now, as far as I know, they haven't got bilingual scripts in Stockton on Tees, as far as I know. And the chances are the address would probably be a Welsh address. My dear late friend Jimmy Prosser lived in Hewlterdy, Cymru de Cairo. Now I'm fairly certain there isn't a Cymru de Cairo in Taunton. And if there is, nobody's told me. It is a nonsense to talk about an open border. But mind, I'm going to say this just at the beginning, and I'll say that before I forget. The sad thing about open borders is they sort of pop up in funny places. I took my granddaughter, one of my granddaughters, to school last week. And she goes to Ysgol Cymraeg Biniago in Pontarddulais, still very much a Welsh-speaking village. Drove back through Pontllew, still very much a Welsh-speaking village. Feeling good now about tonight, feeling good about the campaign. Oh, it doesn't last long, there's an optimism. I went round the bend and down this big sign, new housing development by, whoever it was, the Poplars. And I think, actually it gets worse. There's now a new housing estate near us, which is going to be called Adobe. Honest? Adobe. So you live in Mexico, just down the road from Swansea. The Poplars. God, I can't imagine it. I mean, they've got authority and power over names. I can't imagine a Welsh developer going to, I don't know, Salisbury and building an estate and calling it Llanllenwen. There's been an interesting debate on Nation Cymru this week. His name is Duncan Fisher, I'm not really sure, I don't know. But it raises an interesting question of how we measure wealth. The truth is that we have to measure wealth certainly to have a picture of what's going on in other countries and a feel of how things work with GDP, whatever like that. But there are obviously other measures. There are other important ways we can measure a successful small state. And I'm going to, if I may, just run through this quickly. The UN, it's fascinating stuff. Go on the website, it's brilliant. The UN publishes a happiness index. I think it's great, Cliff. A happiness index. And it's based on income, freedom, health, life expectancy, and social support and generosity are the factors. Get ready for this. Here we go. Top 10. Finland, Denmark, Norway, Iceland, Netherlands, Switzerland, Sweden, New Zealand, Canada in fairness, Austria. Think about where are they, how are they, how big are they? The best countries to raise children, according to one of the many US websites that deal with this. Care for human rights, family friendly, gender equality, happiness, income equality, level of safety, well-developed public education system, that lets us out. Well-developed healthcare system, that lets us out. Here we go again. Best countries to raise children. Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Finland, Canada, Netherlands, Switzerland, New Zealand, Australia, and in fairness, Austria. What do all these have in common? I let you work that out. Now then, there are those who argue that GDP is too crude a measure. Some countries are developing what's called a Human Development Index, which is quite interesting actually. And the Human Development Index is taken as an alternative to GDP. It's based, amongst other things, on life expectancy, a long and fruitful life, education, literacy and so forth, that lets us out again, a decent standard of living, we left out again, and a decent standard of income, we make this up. And here we go again, it's boring now, isn't it? We take it on. Now here we go again. Norway, Switzerland, Ireland, Germany, Iceland, Sweden, Netherlands, Denmark, Finland. God, it gets boring, isn't it? Lastly, I want to just touch on something else. I'm going to sit down. I forgot what I was going to say. But fair play, you're all still awake. That's good. I did my bit during the Cymdeithas yr Iaith campaign, the roadside campaign. I remember with some affliction. I remember Jimmy, and sadly Jimmy Prosser is new with us anymore. And we decided to take the day off, we were apprentices, borrow his father's car, and went to John O'Toole's to buy a bolt cutter. We donated our beer money, great love of all that sort of stuff. We donated our beer money, and we tried to explain to this guy John O'Toole's what he wanted his fancy, expensive bolt cutter for. He knew exactly what we wanted it for. So we ended up with some amazing story. Jimmy was brilliant. He made us a fascinating story about his father's farm, and he was doing something under a fence, and this guy took it all in. I went, okay, Jimmy, you do father farm shop. So I done my bit, I well, you know, for the language, hopefully, etc. But one of the things about when the Bowen Committee reported, here we go again. Do you remember, some of you remember the Bowen Committee? And the enemies of Wales said, oh, there'll be blood everywhere. It won't be safe to drive on the roads because people will be so confused by two languages, they'll be crashing all over the place. And of course it's true. I mean, if you go to Pembrokeshire in the summer, it's hell. There's cars everywhere, cars overturned, caravans on this side, and you know, it's driving along, and maybe they say, oh, where's Binbrook up his Scott? Forgetting the quote, and also says Tenby. Oh, this is going to get good. This will be bodies everywhere with two languages. Of course, what the enemies of Wales forgot to tell us is that in Iceland they have 4 languages, in Finland they have 3 languages, in Switzerland they have 4 languages, in Croatia they have 4 languages, in Malta they have 2 languages, in Norway they have 2 languages, in India they have 12 languages and 1,000 different dialects. Papua has a population of 8 million souls. And I looked this up and I thought this can't be the case. I double checked and double checked. Papua has 832 different languages. Can you imagine the size on their roadside? We are big enough, we are smart enough. But before I finish, Washington. I think we should remember what we live in England with. Wonderful place to live, England with. Because, you know, we are so good at things. Oh yeah, you think about it for a minute. We are so good at these things. Just think, we've got more food banks than anywhere else in Western Europe. That's fantastic. I mean, that's something to be proud of. Don't you think so? I'm a great believer in choice. I'm a great believer in choice. So people in Wales this winter will have a choice between warming their homes and feeding their kids. That's wonderful. And isn't it nice to fade from life in a warm, cosy ambulance in the middle of the night? And isn't it nice to be sleeping on the streets? Just think how healthy that is. And those people who are sitting on the end begging, they're not really begging, they're enjoying the fresh air. What a lovely place to live. And of course, we finally solved the obesity problem. Our children go to bed hungry. It's got to be better than this.
Right.
Diolch am wrando, come on.
Good job.